welcome or welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, hi, my name is Samantha and this is my channel where I talk all about books. Anyway, today I'm coming to you with my February wrap up. So I'm going to be chatting about all of the books that I read in February. I read 4 books in February, but I finished a 5th book on the 1st of March. I mostly read it in February, so I'm going to just talk about it here because why not? It doesn't really matter. It was 24 hours later than the month ended. I don't care. So I'm just going to include it. Also, I think it just makes more sense to talk about it now rather than talk about it in a month's time. I'm also going to talk briefly about my nonfiction pick for February, because if you missed it in my goals video, I talked about how I want to read 1 nonfiction book a month, and I'm falling a little bit behind because I haven't finished my February book yet. But I'm going to mention it briefly in case anyone is curious, and I will properly review it next month in March. Well, I guess at the end of this month, because we're in March already. But yeah, I thought I would mention it briefly, just in case anyone is curious, in case anyone wants a nonfiction book. Anyway, but that book is Let's Get Physical: How Women Discovered Exercise and Reshaped the World by Danielle Friedman. This is a book about women's exercise, if you couldn't tell. Yeah, it just talks about the history of women's exercise, because you'd think it was kind of straightforward, but it really isn't. For a very long time, women were told that they shouldn't exercise because your uterus would fall out. Interesting. And also it was just considered manly, it was considered gross for women to have muscles, and yeah, they women weren't supposed to sweat. So this woman talks all about how women started exercising, and goes into all of the different types. There's a chapter on running, a chapter about the history of the bar workout, and I just read about jazzercise. It's all very interesting. So if that sounds at all interesting to you, I would definitely recommend it. But I will review this properly next month. Now moving on to the 5 books that I read. So I'm going to do what I did last month and go from worst to best, because I feel like that's the best way to do it. So I'm gonna start off with my worst book of the month, and definitely my worst book of the year so far. It's a romance book, and my worst book last month was also a romance book, so clearly romance is just disappointing me at the moment, which is such a shame. No, but that book was It Happened One Summer by Tessa Bailey. I was so excited for this book. If you don't know what this book is about, it's basically a Schitt's Creek inspired story following this character who's kind of like Alexis from Schitt's Creek. But the character is called Piper, and she's this rich Los Angeles socialite, and one day she does something really stupid after a breakup. So her stepfather ends up sending her to this small fishing town in the Pacific Northwest as sort of a punishment, because it's very much basic. Her father, who has died, he owned a bar there, and is that right? I think that's right. But the stepfather bought the bar and has been maintaining it for however many years, 20 years or whatever. And so as punishment, Piper has to move there, and there she meets this guy called Brendan, and they hate each other, but it very quickly turns into a romance. I thought the premise sounded really good because I love Schitt's Creek. I thought it was so fun. It's not my favorite show ever, but I did think it was really fun, and I thought it sounded like it would be a really fun book. But I didn't really like anything about this book. I ended up giving this book a 2.25 out of 5 stars. Don't ask me why I got the 2.5. I don't know. I don't know why I got the quarter, but it got the quarter. Anyway, but I didn't really like this book. Actually, I actively disliked it by the end, and I ended up skimming 100 pages at the end because I was just bored. Basically, I liked the premise, but I did not like the characters. I didn't like either of the characters. Piper was so annoying. Brendan, also annoying, but in a different way. The characters got together way too fast. Considering the fact that it's an enemies to lovers romance, it happened way too fast. It was well within the first half, and I feel like it should have happened. I don't know. I feel like the feelings should just be starting to develop by that point, and maybe not full-fledged relationship at that point. And then once they got together, everything else moved really quickly. The relationship, I mean, not the actual book. Once they got together, the book got extremely boring. This is also very nitpicky, but I hate. I hate using baby as a nickname. I really hate it. I once accidentally called my boyfriend baby, because I always call him bebe as a joke. But I accidentally called him baby, and I was so grossed out by it. I was like, I'm so sorry. Because we were both on the same page. We do not like baby. And once Brendan started using it, he just didn't stop. It was so, it was used so much, and it just made me cringe because I hate it so much. On that same note, the smut, oh my god, I hated it. It was so bad. Oh my god, I just hated it so much. I didn't like the wording. It just, it was not good. It was not good smut. I did not like it at all. The more I talk about it, the more I'm like, oh, this book just sucked. I'm definitely gonna be getting rid of this one. I'm so sad that I bought it, but my library didn't have it, so I was like, oh, let me get it. And now, of course, my library has it when I finally get around to reading it. of course. I do think I will pick up the sequel. I've heard that it really doesn't have very much smut, so I think I'm gonna like it more because I hated the smut in this. And it follows Piper's sister. I think her name's Hannah. It follows her sister and a guy that she met in this book. So I'm curious to read about their relationship. I've also heard that people who didn't like this book gave the second book a try and they enjoyed it more. So yeah, I think the book's not even out yet. Those are the people with arcs, or maybe it is out now. I'm not sure. But anyway, I would not recommend this book. I hated it. Yeah, I hated it. Let's just go ahead and say that. I did not like it one bit. Anyway, moving on. The next book I'm going to talk about is Where the Crawdads Sing by Delia Owens. I've recently heard some controversy over Delia Owens, which I had not heard before, about her potentially killing someone, which is not good at all. I'm going to link a video that talks about it in the description because I don't actually know all of the details, so I'm going to link that down below so you can go watch it. But disregarding anything to do with the author, let's just talk about the book. If you don't know what Where the Crawdads Sing is about, where have you been? This book has been so popular since like 2020. I think it's died down now, but like I remember all of 2020 everyone was just raving about this book. It basically follows our main character Kaya, who's like known as the Marsh Girl. She lives alone on the marsh because she's been abandoned by her family and everyone around town like sees her as a social outcast, and so she doesn't really spend a lot of time with anyone. And one day this guy called Chase Andrews is murdered and everyone thinks that it's her who did it, so it's kind of like following the murder trial partially and also just Kaya's life. I ended up giving this book a 3.25 out of 5 stars, which is not a particularly bad rating, but it's also not like an amazing rating. I had the audiobook of this and I'm so glad I did because I don't think I would have been able to get into it without the audiobook. I probably listened to like the first half on audio and then I like read and then also listened to the last half. So yeah, without the audiobook, I definitely wouldn't have been able to get through it because there are some very lengthy descriptions of nature, which, I mean, it was good for setting the scene, but eventually I got really, really bored of it. I was like, okay, I get it. I know what the marsh looks like. I know what all the animals are like. I don't need to know anymore. And I get it because like, I think Delia Owens was like a nature writer, so it makes sense. But I mean, there has to be plot to a book as well, not just descriptions of nature. And there was a plot to this book. Saying as if it doesn't have a plot is unfair because it did have a plot. The only problem was I think it was very predictable. Kind of like throughout the book, like we would be reading something and I'd be like, okay, this is what's gonna happen next, and then it would happen. And that just continued on throughout. Even at the end, I knew what was going to happen, so that was a bit disappointing, and that's kind of why I rated it lower than I may have. I will say it was very like atmospheric, and I was quite enthralled by the second half because like I wanted to see where it was going to go with the murder trial, even though I knew where it was going to go. But still, I was like, maybe it will surprise me and go a different way. It didn't. So yeah, I'm glad I had the audiobook, but yeah, it was okay. It was just okay. I wouldn't necessarily recommend it, especially knowing things about the author. Wouldn't recommend it, but it wasn't like the worst book I've ever read, so I gave it 3.25. Moving on, the next book I'm actually going to talk about 2 books at once, but one of them I rated lower than the other. But those 2 books are City of Bones and City of Ashes by Cassandra Clare. This is a book that I finished on the 1st of March, but I'm going to talk about it now. I'm currently rereading the entire Shadowhunter Chronicles for the Shadowhunter read-along. I don't know if that's what they're calling it, but it's being hosted by Darian, Lisa, and Casey. I'll link all their channels down below, including their announcement videos so that you can check it out and find out all the information. Basically, we're reading 1 book a month for the foreseeable future because there are so many of them. So yeah, we're currently on the Mortal Instruments, and then it is going to be in like publication order. So I think after City of Glass, then we start alternating between the Infernal Devices and the Mortal Instruments. So yeah, anyway, I've been rereading these books. And I was worried because I first read these books back in 2014. They're some of the books that got me back into reading. They were actually recommended to me by my very good friend Alice. We went to secondary school together and we're still friends, which is amazing. But she recommended these books to me and they got me into reading, and they also like helped me to discover BookTube, and like I wouldn't be here today without this series. As in like I wouldn't be on BookTube today without this series. Anyway, so I'm very grateful to this series. And then I reread the first 4 books in 2015. I never finished rereading the series, so this has been a long time coming and I was concerned, but I'm having such a fun time. Rereading City of Bones was so much fun. I felt kind of like halfway through January I was starting to get a bit slumpy, and then I picked this book up because I actually started it in January and finished it in like early February, but I'd already filmed my January wrap up, so I'm just talking about it here. Anyway, whatever. Yeah, I was starting to feel a little bit slumpy and I picked this up and oh my god, this was so fun. It was such a quick read and it was just so fun to be back in this universe again with these characters. It's definitely cheesy. Some of the dialogue, extremely cheesy. The plot, Actually, I think the plot of this one is not that bad. The plot of the second one, not great. But I just loved this one so much. I gave it 4.5 out of 5 stars. And I was so glad that I still loved it as much as I did 7 years ago. So yeah, I'm really excited to continue on because I know that City of Glass was one of my favorite ones. So I'm really excited to get to that one next. But yeah, I gave this one 4.5 out of 5 stars. I loved it. And then City of Ashes, I literally just finished. I gave this one a 3.5 out of 5 stars. This was always one of my least favorite ones in the series. I think City of Fallen Angels, which is book 4, that is my least favorite, and then this one, because this one is just, it doesn't have the best plot. It was still a fun time, and what I found really funny was that I could still remember things that happened in this book even though I read it 7 years ago. Like, it was crazy. As I was reading it, I was kind of like, oh, I think this happens like next, and then it would happen, and I was like, oh my god. So it was really fun for me to like be remembering those things while I was reading it. You might think that's like annoying because, like, you know, I'm kind of like spoiling the book for myself, but it wasn't. It was just like, I was like, oh, that's so weird that my brain has just randomly held on to this knowledge, which is completely not important for my day-to-day life. But it was so much fun. I gave this one 3.5 out of 5 stars. Again, the dialogue in this was very cheesy, like cheesier than the first book. I don't know how this book got worse than the first book, because you'd think that, like, with City of Bones being Cassandra Clare's first book, you'd think that this one would be worse, but it's actually the other way around, for me, personally. I'm still really enjoying this series, and I can't wait to read the 3rd book this month. So excited. Oh, if you don't know what The Mortal Instruments is about, where on earth have you been? It follows our main character Clary, and one day she goes into this nightclub with her best friend Simon. She sees 3 people murdering someone, and she's like, what the hell? But turns out they actually were not murdering a person, they were killing a demon, and she discovers all about Shadowhunters, who are demon hunters essentially, and learns all about that. And she actually is herself a demon hunter, but she didn't know that because her mom was keeping it a secret from her. So yeah, she's learning all about being a Shadowhunter and everything to do with that. There are also werewolves and vampires and warlocks and fairies. It's got a whole bunch of different things in it, and it's such a fun series. It is from 2007. I think the first book came out in 2007, so it's a bit dated, but it's a fun time. I would, if you haven't read it, I mean, maybe you're not going to, but if you're going to, it is fun. Anyway, now moving on to my favorite book of the month, which was Anxious People by Fredrik Backman. I'm so surprised. I don't know why, but I feel like I've been putting off reading books by Fredrik Backman because he's so popular. I've always thought, oh, they're not gonna live up to the hype, but this book was so good. It wasn't what I was expecting, but I really enjoyed it. This book, if you don't know, basically is about a bank robbery turned hostage situation, but it's really more just about people. Very emotional and quite like sad. Definitely a big focus of this book is actually like suicide and depression, so big trigger warnings for those. But yeah, I don't want to go into too much detail about the plot because I feel like it's best to just know that it's a bank robbery turned hostage situation, but it's more than that. It's really just focusing on the characters and their lives and their problems. It's weird because Fredrik Backman has like a very humorous writing style. I feel like it was like a very funny writing style, but at the same time, he was covering like such deep, heavy topics. So it was kind of a weird juxtaposition. And yeah, it was like light when it needed to be light, and then, you know, it like, but somehow it also made you feel really emotional at the same time. I didn't cry because I am heartless, but it was a really good book. I really enjoyed this book. I don't really know how to explain it because it is just like a character-driven story. I don't know. I would highly recommend this if you haven't read any Fredrik Backman before. It was really good, and I'm really glad I read it. I definitely will be picking up Beartown at some point, but just not at the moment. But at some point soon. But anyway, yeah, so those were all the books that I read in the month. Let me know what books you read down below. I would love to know. Did you read any good romance books? Because like, I need recommendations clearly because I've only been reading trash romance books this year. Yeah, anyway, that's all that I have for this video. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you liked it. If you did, please give a thumbs up. If you're new here, feel free to subscribe down below. And I was about to say I post videos on Sunday, but like I don't really, but I should post videos on Sunday, but whatever. I'll see you at some point very soon with another video. Bye!